Hey everybody, it's Matt from Kit here, and today I want to show you how I like to use our plugins to breathe life into a dull vocal. So let's jump in. Here I have a simple session. We've got a few vocal tracks and a music track at the top. We're just going to be looking at this one looped section of the song so that I can show you what I would do to fix a dull vocal. These vocals were not recorded in a perfect situation. The microphone placement, selection, the room, etc. were not great, and because of that, the vocal does come across quite dull. Let's take a quick listen.
I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
So all I'm going to do today is talk about how I use our plugins to process these vocals, and I'm going to take a bus processing approach to that. So I'm going to process the lead vocal, and then I'm going to separately process all of the background vocals, the harmonies, the layers, all together through a bus in Pro Tools. And I'm only going to use a few of our plugins just to breathe a little extra life into this, to tame out some of the dynamics and to add some color, saturation, and of course fix that lack of high end that is quite obvious. So here's what it sounds like if I just turn on the plugins that I've already put in here on.
I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same. Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
So let's take a look at what I did to bring life to these vocals. We're going to start with our lead vocal. So my first plugin is the BBN 105 V2. What I'm doing here is effectively I'm starting by adding some saturation using our preamp. I have auto gain and continuous on, switch to mic mode and bring up that color. Because these vocals were tracked with very limited analog gear, there isn't a lot of clarity. There's no saturation or harmonic content. So I'm adding a little bit of that in using this section of the plugin. Then I'm getting down into our EQ. Of course, like I said, the track was very dull, so adding a lot of frequency up here at 6.8 K, bringing a little bit of the 3.9. Again, a little more upper register frequency, a little more power in the voice. I found myself wanting to boost 1200 hertz a lot because the vocal, again, not only was it lacking power in the upper register, but in the mid-range, I wanted it to cut through the track more. And this track had a lot of mid-range frequency that I had to dip down, so bringing a little bit of that frequency back in the vocal seemed like a nice idea. I'm boosting a little bit at 330 hertz with the peak button on so that the vocal doesn't lose all of its weight, and then I'm doing a fairly aggressive high pass at 150 hertz because this vocal had a lot of background noise and mud in it, so that just sort of cleans all that up. Following up the BBN 105 in the chain, I'm using the core compressor. And what I'm doing with this is a fairly standard vocal compression. I'm trying to get between sort of 2 and 4 dB of gain reduction at the loudest parts. Again, just evening out those peaks, bringing a little bit of body back into the vocal and helping it sit evenly throughout the mix without the need for excessive automation. And then this last plugin is actually just a trim so that once I do all of this, I'm not greatly boosting the volume of the track when we go to A-B it. And so I'm using this trim because it's a good clean way to cut back some volume without affecting the sound too much. And when I do the bypass, it doesn't have any weird reactions to being bypassed and unbypassed. Moving on down to the background vocals here. So like I said, I have all the doubles. So this track had a mono center double, a left and right double of the lead, and then 2 harmony tracks, a high harmony and a mid harmony. And what I did is said, I'm just going to keep it simple today. I'm going to route all of them to a background vocal bus and process them together. All of my vocals have a reverb send to an external reverb channel, so that's not being affected by my plugins. But if we go in here, we can see I'm doing a similar thing to the background vocal. We have the BBN 105. We're adding some saturation and color. We're adding high frequency, although not as much. I don't want it to compete too much with my lead vocal. Here we're actually dipping a little bit of the 6.8. We have so many stacks in there that the sibilance becomes an issue. That's a frequency that you can dip back a little and help. We're still boosting 1200 hertz, just not quite as much. Here, instead of boosting 330, I'm actually taking away a little extra at 180 in addition to taking away everything below 150. I'm doing this again. There's so many stacks here that I wanted it to not get in the way of our lead vocal. You want your lead vocal to be present and on top, and everything else is just color, it's character, it's extra. I'm not adding any analog hum. It's an electronic song. It doesn't really need analog hum. Then on this channel, moving on, again, I have the core compressor. I'm hitting this a little harder because, again, they're stacks, they're background vocals. I want them to almost act like a pad behind my lead vocal that is supporting it, and I don't need so much dynamics in it. So I'm just hitting it a bit harder with the threshold, a little bit faster attack, otherwise fairly similar settings. And then here I do actually have a third plugin I am using. And you can see I'm using this one to compensate for the output gain of the background vocals. But after the compression, I wanted to bring a little bit of extra character back into this. So a little bit of 12.5, a little bit at 2K, 5K, and 320 to rebolster the background vocals. The problem was when I was boosting them on the BBN 105 before the compressor, I was hitting the compressor harder because of it. So like this, I can hit the compressor, tame out all those transients, get the dynamics right, and then bring in the frequencies that I want back using the Mo-Q, which is a great plugin because it doesn't sound harsh no matter what you do. And I can be a little more aggressive without worrying about creating something that's going to clash with my lead vocal or hurt. Up here on the track, I do have one thing going on, and that's just cutting 802K. This track had a lot of content in those frequencies, so I wanted to cut it out. Once I did that, though, did make the track feel a little dull, so bringing up that 5 and 12.5 helps add a little bit of life back into the track. And then on my master bus, just to make sure everything glues together nicely, I have our barrier plugin, just a little bit of added saturation to everything that will create a glue because it'll impart the same character on all of the files that pass through it. I'm not doing anything to the high or low cut. I'm not playing with anything other than the barrier knob. At default, bring barrier up to about 2. That's what I got going on here. So let's just take another listen real quick to the vocals soloed. So here's our lead vocal.
Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
So here's what it sounded like before I processed it.
Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
And then with our processing.
Girl, I can never stay.
You can hear some audible saturation, although once it's in the mix, that's not an issue. That's sort of the style we wanted on this track. And you can obviously hear that difference in the high frequency, but also the difference between the words is not as dramatic thanks to that compression. Now let's take a listen to the background vocals. Here are the background vocals before the processing.
Girl, I can never stay.
So you can hear they're dull. There's not a lot of high frequency, but also certain harmonies are popping out at different times because the words have different levels of transient content in them. So now we're going to turn on the processing and take a listen.
Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
You can hear, again, the high frequencies back. There's a bit of audible saturation to breathe life into it. And then the compressor's making everything a much more uniform volume, so I don't have to go in and do a ton of volume automation at the end. So let's quickly do an A/B again of everything together. Here's without the vocal processing.
Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same.
And with it.
Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same. Girl, I can never stay, 'cause I know you'll stay the same. Girl, I can never.
So that's how I use our plugins to process a dull vocal. I hope this helps you a little bit, and I'd love to hear your mixes that you're using our plugins on. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we'll have more great content like this soon.